So Götterdämmerung has been out for a few weeks now, and there are a lot of things in it I like a lot. Other things I think went a little bit too far, and still some things within the game that I wish they would have added and didn't. So first of all, let's take a look at the focus tree, predominantly this side, the ahistorical. This, all of this right here, this is LARP. This would never happen. I mean, granted, that's probably true of just about every ahistorical focus in the game. The problem with ahistorical branches is mainly that this game is set January 1st, 1936. If this game was set 1932, 1933, I would not call this LARP. Germany was a tinderbox, but after the Reichstag fire and the Enabling Act, all the things the Nazis had done between 33 and 36 to secure power, this would never happen. They had locked it down. The only way Germany could have a ruler other than Adolf Hitler is if Hitler was assassinated. If he was assassinated sometime between 36 and 39 before World War II started, the Nazis would still be in power. If Hitler was assassinated, it's likely because he pissed off someone in the Wehrmacht. And so I imagine the National Socialists who would replace him would, I mean, it'd probably be somebody among these names, but it would likely be somebody who is more sympathetic or loyal to the Wehrmacht. Which one thing everyone anticipated but never happened was Germany has no balance of power. What you would think, like, they would have such a thing, considering there was that legitimate tension between the SS and the Wehrmacht. So I don't understand why Paradox didn't go that route with this. You know, Hitler, there was tons of failed assassination attempts on him, some that went closer than others. But you really don't see that tension outlined in the game. I would have loved to see over here on, like, if when you reorganize the Wehrmacht, say you do that, I feel like that's something that would trigger people within the Wehrmacht to, like, start plotting against Hitler. And then you would have to go ahead and bribe senior officers. This is how you would fix that tension. And, like, say you reorganize the Wehrmacht, but you don't, you know, indoctrinate the army in time, you know, you risk Hitler being assassinated. Something like that. Now, in the time between 39 to 45, when the war ended, yes, there was ample opportunities for Hitler to be assassinated. And if there was a regime change in the Reich at that time, it would probably be a military dictatorship. Which actually, I think that is a focus on the new focus tree. I doubt anyone ever does it, but yeah, military dictatorship, it is there. This would most likely be the result of a coup against Hitler and the Nazis. But this probably would only happen while the war was going on. Now, full disclosure, I am not a World War II historian. World War II history is mainly something I've done recreationally the past few years. I do have an advanced degree in history. It's Christian theology and Christian history, which, big shout out, Dietrich Bonhoeffer is in here. Excellent pastoral theologian. His letters from prison are some of the best pastoral theology I have ever read. What would have made me even more impressed is if they had my boy Karl Barton there. Anyways, that's a side tangent. So some areas I really like. I love this. The 4-year plan dynamic, the MIFO bill dynamic. You know, Germany's economy at the time was essentially a Ponzi scheme. And it was doomed to fail, much like the German economy in World War I was precipiced on being able to quickly win the war because the cost of the war were unsustainable. And that was exactly the same mistake they made in World War II. So these MIFO bills effects where, you know, we mobilize fast and the only way we can keep our economy going is to go ahead and go to war. It also explains why the Germans go ahead and invade Poland in 1939. The game mechanic has that as the MIFO bills. The cost gets up, like you start out the game, it's only 10%. When you get up to 80, 90%, it's getting too expensive. the economy is about to collapse. Invading Poland, they couldn't wait very much longer, historically, or else the economy was going to implode. So having the MIFO bills, it makes a lot of sense why, if this game is to be used as an educational tool, why the Germans push. And then if you're a player, you kind of notice by 1939, you've already done all the gimmicky decisions you can to keep your consumer goods factories percentage down. And so you have to invade. That is very true to the conflict in the economy of the time. I love that. Some things I don't like. I guess this is my concern for players of this game and not necessarily the developers. These are all evil people. Very evil people. But as you go through this inner circle dynamic, these people get immensely powerful. And shoot, if you do the strong successor, if you've ever chosen one of these guys, just the leader traits they get are insane. We're talking about like 5 or 6 categories where you get a 15% buff. Take that and compare it to over here, FDR. FDR, the most long-standing and popular president in U.S. history. What are his leader traits? He dislikes Germany. Then you go over to Germany and you look, and you can get Goebbels' satanic brain in power, and he has some of the most obscene leader traits I've ever seen. Maybe this isn't glorifying Nazis so much as Paradox has a power creep problem. If you're going to have that, it's kind of a joke that FDR, his only thing is, he just dislikes Germany. He doesn't like sauerkraut. I don't know what to tell you. There were 2 major things that gave Germany a huge advantage on the ocean in 1940. One was the magnetic mine, and 2 was Enigma, their ability to do encryption. Now, if I look at this focus tree, this is talking about mines like ore mines. There is nothing in this about magnetic mines. And in fact, if you go through the mining focus, like the research, okay, here's magnetic mines. Apparently, they're a 1936 technology that when the war starts in 1939, in our timeline at least, nobody had magnetic mines but the Germans. And yet, so I guess everybody on their focus tree, their research focus, went ahead and just skipped this research, which, to be fair, I always do, because mines are worthless in this game. That is something I really wish they would buff up, because if you get to 1940 in our timeline, for a hot second there, the British were losing more ships than they were building. Their economy was crippling. That was the aim of the German U-boat, was we're just going to convoy raid their economy into oblivion. Keep in mind, the Germans were doing this with less than 60 boats, less than 60 submarines. The British, shortly after they figured out what the magnetic mine was, started working on degaussing on their ships. That was it took them just a few weeks to figure out how to do that. So apparently, the British, they knew what mines were. They discovered Germany's magnetic mine, and then figured out degaussing before they knew how to build magnetic mines themselves. You know how the Germans were laying those magnetic mines? Planes. The open seas were too dangerous. They were using aerial mine laying in 1940. This game has aerial mine laying as a 1942 technology when the Germans were using it in 1939. Okay, that's not a big deal. Maybe the Germans just researched something ahead of time. There are no bonuses for researching mines when that was a massive part. The Germans were the only, to best of my knowledge, German mine warfare was way ahead of everybody else in 1940. And that's not represented here at all. Okay, what about Enigma? If I look for that, there is nothing in this focus tree about Enigma. This was the most sophisticated cipher in the world at the time. There is nothing in this focus tree about encryption. That's just kind of frustrating. Like, you took the time to rework the whole tree, and the 2 big shockers to the Allies, at least in the naval game, was the Germans' ability to encrypt with Enigma and the use of magnetic mines, and there's nothing here. Last thing, and this is something I wish that they would have included in the game, I think would make for some really fun dynamics. So, After the Germans invaded the Benelux region and conquered France, their hope was, and part of the reason Rudolf Hess flew over to the UK, was that they could negotiate a peace treaty. The Germans had no intent on conquering the entire world. They did not want to be responsible for garrisoning all these British lands. They knew if the UK was weak, all these Asian assets would be ripe for Japan's taking. Hitler's attitude towards Japan really shifted after 1941. Remember, the Germans had advisors in China. They were kind of xenophiliacs in a way. Given all that history, I would love to see a situation where once you've conquered, the Benelux region and Vichy's established, that you get a decision available to you, make peace with the UK. There is a dynamic in here, if you're ever at war, that's like, do a conditional surrender. Almost no one ever uses the conditional surrender dynamic because the opinion prerequisites for the nations are almost never met. I would love a decision for the Germans where they can send a peace agreement offering to the British, and that the British have the opportunity to accept it. The peace offering at the time, which I don't remember all the details of, but essentially it would result in a white peace with the Allies. Germany annexes all of Poland. They get puppet governments in the Netherlands and Belgium including Nord-Pas-de-Calais. And then the Germans get to reintegrate Alsace-Lorraine and Luxembourg. But then the French, Vichy becomes the main government, and the Vichy government annexes all the rest of their corps and all the colonial territories that went over to the free French side. Maybe it results in the UK, they have to give up Malta and Cyprus, and then over here British Somaliland, along with Garissa. That goes to the Italians. But that would be the White Peace event offering. So the British would get that event. If they have Halifax in power, say there's like a 50-50 chance that they agree to this peace offering. If they have Winston Churchill in power, it's 99% chance they say no. Because historically, pretty much everybody on the war cabinet was like, yeah, this war is not winnable, and if it is winnable, it's not worth it. Everyone had that mindset except for Churchill. Churchill was obstinate and wanted to continue the war, and it worked out for them. I would love to see that event. I think that would make for really interesting gameplay where the Germans and the Allies together support the Chinese against the Japanese. The Germans and the Allies together working against the Soviets. One other decision that I think would be great that is rooted in the actual history of this conflict. So towards the end of the war, you have the Soviets have pushed in, and it's the race to Berlin. Hitler's hiding in the Führer bunker. During that time, Himmler actually stabs Hitler in the back. Himmler goes and meets up with the Allies and says, hey, we'd like to make you an offer. We will surrender all our gains in Europe. We will kick Hitler out of power, and in exchange, we'd like to join the Allies and fight the Soviets. To frame it in the way the Nazis saw it, the Germans and the British, we are natural allies. The real problem is Judeo-Bolshevism. In this event, you would get the option to where Germany and the Allies white peace, Regno del Sud takes over for Repubblica Sociale Italiana. If the Allies accept this offer, essentially the map goes back to the way it was, except for whatever territory that the Soviet Union controls, and the Allies and the Germans together go ahead and push the Soviet Union. And shoot, we could even make Himmler a puppet of the British. This would be like a decision that Germany has available to it once they're at like 90 or 95% of the way towards capitulation. Let's just say the Allies are having a rough game and the Soviets have something like 70+% of the war score. And in the British and the Americans' mind, we're going to have a Europe completely controlled by the communists. And if that's the case, I think they accept it, and then they go fight the Soviets using German infantry. Like this was a plan Churchill had. Churchill wanted this. It was vetoed by the other people in Allied command. I think this event would get accepted if the Soviets had way higher war score than the Allied powers. I imagine, though, something like that would probably be difficult to code into the game.